Okej, nu är klockan 8:45 och jag hoppar lite mellan olika språk. Jag tror det är många som är på väg in fortfarande, men jag börjar ändå säga god morgon och välkomna till SGF Grundvattens frukostföredrag. Jag tror det är nummer 2 för året. Och idag så har vi en gäst från Nederländerna. So that's because we will switch to English in a short while. Jag tänker så här att har ni några frågor, skriv dem i Q&A. Skriv dem helst inte i chatten, helst i Q&A för där kommer vi hålla bäst koll. Men ni får skriva i chatten också om det är något. Jag ska också säga att glöm inte att bli medlemmar i SGF. Det kan vi rekommendera. Jag är med i grundvattensektionens styrelse så det är därför jag har fått äran att säga hej och välkomna idag. Yeah, welcome Guido. I think you can present yourself, but we are very happy to get to listen to you here today and appreciate it a lot. So, yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's Swedish, of course, is not my native language, but it's funny. I can understand, of course, a few words when you compare it to my Dutch language. So English is, of course, not my native language. I speak a lot of German, so I have always switched my mind to another mindset to English. I'm sorry for that, but yeah, of course, we have a PowerPoint. I've written down everything in English. When you've got questions after my presentation, it's fine to me. But sorry for my not native English. Technical, everybody can see my presentation now, my screenshot, I think. Okay, perfect. Now, the thing about my presentation, I want to introduce myself first. Tell me something about my companies in the Netherlands, about my groundwater dewatering companies. And then a helicopter view on groundwater dewatering in the Netherlands. This presentation is not very technical, not about the technical details, but more on the kind of legislations that we are used to work with. You can imagine that in a very densely populated country like the Netherlands, with a high groundwater table, there is a lot of legislation to do groundwater dewatering. So I want to tell you something about that in a helicopter view. To introduce myself, born in the beginning of the 1980s, married, 3 children. I was grown up in a family business, a family business in well drilling and groundwater dewatering. In this kind of business, I've got a university degree in management and organization, not in groundwater. I practically raised in the family business, so I've also practically learned all the systems concerning groundwater dewatering. That's more that I'm only 41, but since I was 12 or 13 years old, I start working there in summer holidays and on Saturdays. So there's more than 25 years of experience in the industry. After I finished my study, I started to work in Germany at a civil engineering company and based 60 kilometers in the south of Berlin. What was very interesting at that time, I learned to know a man called Werner Wiels, and he influenced me mostly for a very important stage in my life, because he teach me everything about to re-infiltrate groundwater. And sadly, the man passed away in 2019. but a lot of things I've learned, I'm still doing today, and I think where I'm standing now, it's yeah, I have to yeah, it's his yeah. How do you say that in English? But he was a very important man for me. Now, in the current times on that groundwater re-infiltration, I've got several patents in that field. In the meanwhile, also two persons obtained a PhD on this subject in the Netherlands. When you look in the internet, you see the terms DSI, and in more university terms, it is FHVI, fast high volume infiltration. In the meanwhile, in 2017, I took over the family business. And since 2020, I'm a board member of our National Construction and Infrastructure Association. That's our biggest association on construction and infrastructure. I believe fast 80% of all the construction and infrastructure companies are a member of that association in the Netherlands. And since 2021, in January, took over two companies also in the Netherlands. So I can call me now proudly the largest market player of groundwater dewatering in the Netherlands. What are my companies? Henk van Tongeren. My name is Guido van Tongeren. Henk was my grandfather. He started in the 40s his company. That's always an interesting thing, how the complete industry of groundwater dewatering started in the Netherlands. It started with the profession of a plumber. It was used, or it was normal that when you were living, for example, in a farm outside a city or a village in the Netherlands, and you want to have a drinking water well, you call a plumber. And he was also drilling water wells. And after the Second World War, the industry of groundwater dewatering was first professionally started, because after the Second World War, we have to restore the complete nation, lay down and a highly production of sewer systems, gas pipes, cables, building tunnels, basements. So they need a complete profession of groundwater dewatering. So at that time, more professionalized went from plumbers to separate companies. Now we have 5 locations in the Netherlands as Henk van Tongeren. I'm there with 80 FTE nowadays, mostly based in the north and the east of the country, of the Netherlands. So it was interesting to me to take over another company based in the west part of the country, near Amsterdam. Why? Because vastly 30% of the complete population in the Netherlands living in the west part. We call that the Randstad. That is a combined city of Amsterdam, Rotterdam, The Hague, Utrecht. That's also our mostly important economic area in the Netherlands. And it's also the area with the highest groundwater levels. Mostly geological terms, it's the baddest part. It's a pump dry old swamp when you see that. So it's very interesting to do their business. I took over a company Theo van Velzen with 65 FTE. And also a company, a geohydraulical engineering firm called Tjaden. You see also when they are established, Tjaden in the end of the 19th century and Van Velzen in the 1930s. So you see it also in historical based that mostly that kind of firms started as plumbers, and yeah, after the Second World War, a whole new industry starting. Okay. What I would like to tell you today about our industry. What's important to know how our complete governmental system is working with water. Going to tell you something about that. And also what kind of regulations you have to do when you want to extract and infiltrate groundwater. Because I've got only 30 or 40 minutes to tell you something about our situation in the Netherlands, I can talk about that kind of subject ages. Because there is a lot of legislation and norms which you have to deal with groundwater and water systems. So I've basically put that when you want to extract something out of a construction pit or want to re-infiltrate water, what kind of legislation you need. That's, for example, when you want to drill a geothermal well, you need other legislation. Maybe that's for next webinar, something a new subject, but it's far too many information to share that today with you all. And what I think it's important, maybe it's also different with Sweden, is what is kind of role our geohydrological engineering firms are playing in the Netherlands, also in the field of when you need a permit, for example. And of course, in a country like the Netherlands, we have got also our future and challenges for the next 10 years, and also what has got to do with groundwater and our complete industry. How does our government work? Of course, we have got a state, and the state has got like a puzzle, 12 provinces. What interesting is to know is that you see my mouse here in the middle. This province only exists since 40 years. It's new one pumped dry land, polder. It used to be a sea, the Southern Sea. In the 1930s, they built a big dam, the Afsluitdijk, it's called in the Netherlands. Now it's a complete sweet water system. And after the Second World War, they're starting to pump this kind of land dry. But it's now a complete new province of Flevoland. It's completely lying beneath sea level. Also, I looked at Wikipedia, how much municipalities we've got in the Netherlands. It's not a thing I've got in my mind, but we've got since the 1st of January 352 municipalities. I think the system is the same like in Sweden. Every year we get rid of a few municipalities, but there are now more than 300 left. But there is also, and that's an important thing with the water system, we've got also a fourth governmental system, and it's also a political system. There's a political system with elections and also political parties. Every 4 years there is then a water board election. That governmental system is called water boards. It's quite very old. Since the Middle Ages that there are water boards. We used to have thousands of them. But since the 1st of January 2020, it's now 21. I think in the near future we get rid of 4 or 5 water boards because they merge with each other. When you look, for example, the number 15 and number 9 are talking about a merger. What is interesting to know, it's not when you think, okay, you've got a state, province, and municipality. That's like a puzzle. But water boards are cross-bordering municipalities and also cross-bordering provinces. There is only one water board that is completely fitting in that puzzle, and that is the water board of Friesland. That's also a province of Friesland. What's also typical in that part of the Netherlands, they've got their own language, Frisian. And so when you look at number 7, it's very small, I see, but not called waterschap, what's the Dutch word for water board, but wetterskip, Friesland. It's also in their own language. But that's the only thing that's completely fitting together with the province. You see also very strange borders. When you look at that part of the north, you see when you're living in the city of Assen, you can live exactly in one city. You've got 4 different kind of water boards. That's because of their mergence since the Middle Ages with each other. It's more or less based on the original water system, the original agricultural thing, geological situation in the land. That's always hard to explain for people not living in the Netherlands. How is the system with the water boards? For example, I'm living here in this water board. So every 4 years I have to vote also on a political party. What is the exact role of that kind of water board near groundwater? They also are defending our nation for extreme waters, rain. They're also near, of course, we have got the sea, but we have also got a lot of big rivers going from the mainland of Europe to the delta in the Netherlands. So they have to protect the country, but also have to clean the water system, the sewer systems, wastewater. They're also responsible for that. So it's they also building. They also a principle with some infrastructural things. For example, when they want to construct a complete new dike system or a complete wastewater plant, they are also a system that got money and is a big principle also in the nation. And on the other hand, they are also the enforcement people who are driving around and controlling you also on a construction site. You do nothing wrong. They also giving away the permits you need. Since 2009, they are also from the complete system of groundwater dewatering. They are our main or most important government. Before that time, we had to do with more. So we have to discuss it with provinces, water boards, and municipality. It was a big, complete discussion, and that to the period from 2007 and 8, they say, okay, we have to restructure that, and now mostly 95% of everything to do with groundwater. Groundwater dewatering, we have to go to the water boards. Provinces are also still important. For example, the discussion about geothermal wells, you have to go to the province. But that's also a thing with the complete legislation. When you want to extract or infiltrate water, you restrict it to laws in the Netherlands. And of course, the enforcement about that law is in the hands of your water board, where you are pumping your water in. And every water board has got his own rules. And the things with groundwater and groundwater legislation is that it always functions like a complete umbrella. So we have got a nationwide umbrella, but the 21 water boards can make also their own detailed legislation on that, because not everything in our country is the same. When you look to the left, you see our map. For example, the darker blue is the land laying below sea level. What is below sea level? For example, we measure that, we call that 0 NHP. That's because we call that normal Amsterdam level. It is a level, we started with that in the 17th century. But everybody, when we talk as Dutch people, talk to other nations, they always say, okay, every land laying below 0 is then below sea level, but the sea level is mostly higher than 0. The sea level is mostly between 50 centimeters or 1 meter above that 0 level. You can imagine, since the 17th century, the sea level has risen slightly, but it's rising. So when you see, for example, in the southern part near Rotterdam, you living there 5 or 6 meters below zero. So that's actually 6 or 7 meters below sea level. And what I went talking to you earlier, our most economic important part, where the most people are living in the Netherlands, is also in the darker blue area. So most people in the Netherlands are living in the below sea level. That's also our most important economic part. Here in the city of Amsterdam, or our capital, The Hague, where our government is, for example. The lighter blue areas is above the zero level. It's approximately between 0 and 6 meters. But why it's called lighter blue? Due to the fact of climate change, for example. When the sea level is rising and rising, and there are no dikes in the Netherlands, the only thing that will still remain is the greener part. So when we go back to the subject of legislation, you can imagine that the different kind of waterboards have got also environmental interesting in other things. When you are living in the higher part of the Netherlands, they are interesting in, please don't pump away as much sweet water because of our nature. At the west part, because also the geology situation is there, it was a formal swamp, a delta, so there's a lot of clays and peat, so they're anxious about settlements, for example. So you can imagine the amount of water you want to pump away in a time area, it's much less than in the eastern part of the Netherlands. So back to the umbrella thing. Nationwide, we are saying, okay, you only have to registrate it. You have to do that always, registrating your dewatering when you are pumping less than 100,000 cubic meters a month. But that's a nationwide umbrella law. You always have to look in your water board where you're working. Is that also in the water board legislation, or are you? Is the legislation in the water board that you can only do that with 10,000 cubic meters a month? For example, here in the area of Amsterdam, it's less than 10,000, and this part it's 100,000. It's not a problem when you want to pump more water or re-infiltrate more water than that, but after that border, you need a permit. And the difference is when you want to start your project in a few days or in a few hours, you can only do that with a small extraction of groundwater. You have to register that. That's today you do that completely online. To register that system, but when you want to pump more, you have first to do your complete geohydraulical reports and things, and come also later to that subject. But that's the thing with the regulations. Nationwide, we got an umbrella. The umbrella is going to the 21 water boards, and the water boards can decide about the complete details. They also controlling that. They've got a lot of people driving around the whole day as enforcement and as controlling the complete system. So you don't think I can illegal extract groundwater on a construction pit. But nowadays they're flying around with helicopters and drones, and they immediately register that you are doing something. And when you're doing something wrong in that kind of systems, there are very, very high penalties on that. Tens of thousands of euros you have to pay then when you are doing an illegal activity. Now, what is then the role of an geohydraulical engineering firm? For example, Linn is working at Sweco. Sweco is also based in the Netherlands. They took over a few years ago the Dutch company of Grundvatten, and they're also Sweco in the Netherlands, for example, is a geohydrological engineering firm. And when you want to build your construction pit as a principal, you can go to a company like that and ask, okay, I have to pump more water than 100,000 cubic meters a month. I need a report to get my permit. Also, that kind of reports are also, there's a lot of legislation about that, how to fill in a report. And that's a few kinds of laws are written down the last years about that kind of things, because what is very important to standardize that. A few years ago, every geohydrological engineering firm could fill in a report, and the water boards went crazy because what are the minimal standards a report has to have. So since I believe it was 2012, 2013, we have a legislation called the BRL 12,000, and you see it also on the pictures on my screen. It's based on flow schemes and checklists. So when you are a registered BRL 12,000 engineering firm, you have to get some certificates to do that. You are allowed to fill in a report. That the report you can get your permit. That's also back for my first slide. That's also a political and legal system. The water board can take between 8 and 26 weeks to give you the permit. Yeah, that's always got to do with the complete environmental influence. The water board has to check everything about the for example, groundwater contaminations, settlements, but it's a public system. So when you are asking for a permit, the water board will publish that in online and also in the papers. So people living nearby your construction pit can theoretically won't agree with your permit that you want to have. They have to go then back to the water board, but saying that you won't agree with the complete permit of that construction pit is laying nearby is not enough. You have to get your geohydrological engineering firm yourself, who make new calculations. But the complete systems can cost you a lot of time. So that's always a thing when you want to construct it around a border case between a registration and a permit. That's always also a totally gray level. There's also a lot of discussions. Yeah, what are of course also future challenges we have to face in the next 10 years, approximately until 2030. Also, due to the fact of climate change, we have to get less CO2 emissions, of course, almost 50% when you compare it to the 90s. What maybe is different with other countries surrounding us, that we've got a complete nitrogen crisis in the Netherlands. A lot of people are forgetting it now because we've got also the same pandemic, like COVID, but it still exists. Why we've got a nitrogen crisis? That's we've got more nitrogen pollution than in other countries in Europe, due to the fact that we've got a lot of agricultural and a complete density of agricultural firms on livestock in the Netherlands is enormous. We are the second largest exporter of agricultural stuff in the world, in a very small, high densely populated country. So we've got also a lot of cow manure, fertilization, and And the problem is with a lot of livestock, we've got a lot of nitrogen pollution. That's very bad for the complete biodiversity, of course, of the land. So you see now that when you want to, for example, have a permit to build your road in your infrastructure or build new houses, they say, okay, you can't do that because there is too much nitrogen in the area. There are too much agricultural farms. Now that's an enormous discussion between construction on the one hand and agricultural system on the other hand. And it's also a political thing in the Netherlands. For example, agriculture has its own ministry in the Netherlands, its own minister. So we think it's also a very important thing for our economy. So you know that's also a discussion between environmental things and economy. But when we get rid of the whole COVID pandemic, it's still there. Yeah? So we have to solve that in the next few years. On the other thing is, of course, sustainable energy versus the lack of space. Now the political discussion about building a nuclear plant, for example, is still there because there's less space to build in windmills or building solar panels. When we want to have reductions of CO2 level, we have to build more sustainable energy. But you can imagine nobody wants a windmill in his backyard. And that's always a problem. The population growth, you see that also in the statistic in the left corner. When you look to two scenarios, you see, okay, more than 70 million people. The growth will be when it's less beneath the 80 million inhabitants, but when it's dynamic or more, it can also be approximately 1 million people more. There is already a shortage of affordable houses. They are talking about it. We have to have built more than 1 million houses in the next years, but our yearly production of new houses is maximized about 70 or 80,000. That's our maximum production, and that's not that's every house I'm talking about. So not and the shortage is enormous about affordable housing. You can imagine when a lot of people are living in the west part, the prices of real estate are very high, but also normal families with normal incomes have to live there also. That's an enormous problem. Climate change, sea level rising is of course a problem, but on the other hand, the last 3 years we saw the enormous problem of less rainfall. You see that in the groundwater levels. You see warmer winters with more rain, but also very, very dry springs and summers. Mostly when I look back to the east part of the land, for example, the greener part, the groundwater tables were lowering automatically 1 meter or 1.5 meters. So that's also a big problem for the near future. You can also automatically get settlements of and other problems, of course. And in the west part, because we have to pump our polders complete dry, the land beneath the sea level, we're pumping away our sweet water, our sweet groundwater, but it's getting siltier every time. So the problem with complete lack of sweet water. That's also completely influencing our industry. Yes, as an entrepreneur, I have to invest highly on other systems of pumping instead of diesel-driven pumps, to go more to electric, more to solar panels. Also to extract the water, I have to measure that more closely, and also to re-infiltrate also more and more the sweet water system. So yearly, that's on a yearly base, and I think that will go on the next decennia. You have to to keep at the top of your branch, you have completely to change that. Because on the other hand, what's always with groundwater dewatering, you pumping away the water faster than it's for naturally is flowing through your construction pit, and you need an awful lot of energy for it. And that's when you look to all the points in my presentation, that's of course a problem. And I think the generation of my children won't do that the same way as I'm doing that now. So that's of course an enormous challenge. But I can think we can cope with that, of course. I think we reached the time for questions. In the meantime, I've got also 1 minute a smaller video of our what are we doing in our groundwater industry. So when we first going to watch to that small video, and then I've got time for questions. Okay?
Yes.
Echte bronbemalers worden uit de klei geboren.
Wat een overdreven gedoe. Je kunt het vak ook gewoon leren bij Henk van Tongeren. Als je tot je middel in de klei moet staan, dan doe je iets niet goed.
Als bronbemaler werk je bij Henk van Tongeren Water en Techniek met innovatieve technieken en doe je belangrijk voorbereidend werk voor de bouw. Het droogmalen van de bouwkuip. Zo kan er veilig gewerkt worden. Aan de gaafste infra-, water- en bouwprojecten door heel Nederland.
Oh ja, en we zoeken ook nog nieuwe collega's.
Ook werken met water en techniek? Kijk op henkvantongeren.nl/werkenbij.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how we look. Getting messed up with the clay.
With the clay, yeah, that's it's always a problem to get new people. Also working in that industry, you're always thinking about the Netherlands, a watery country, so it's a lot of people want to work in the industry. Unfortunately, not. So we're also looking for new colleagues, and that was the joke in the film. Huh?
Yeah, and my language there didn't catch.
No, I can imagine that. Huh?
Yeah, thank you very much, Guido. Very interesting to hear about the conditions and the regulations and how it is with groundwater in the Netherlands. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Huh?
Thanks. And I imagine you have questions. You can also ask more technical questions about dewatering. For example, if you are curious. Take the opportunity to ask what you need to ask about well points, ejectors, or something like that. We have one question here from Martin Preen. Excellent talk, thank you. I was mentioned that the water abstraction regulations are enforced in the Netherlands. Does Guido know if many companies are prosecuted for illegal dewatering activities, and what are the penalties?
Yeah, there were, when you looked, for example, 10, 15 years ago, when we starting to professionalize the complete legislation about groundwater extraction, at that time there were also a lot of penalties and a lot of illegal activities. The penalties are mostly based between 1,000 or 100,000 euros, depending on the kind of thing you're doing wrong. But nowadays less and less penalties are given away because the industry is for example, we as a company know that we have to register every dewatering, and we have to talk with the water boards. We are in daily contact with them. and it's not giving sense that we are doing things wrong. And so, but that's a complete culture change in the last 15 years. But luckily nowadays we are doing better. But yes, of course, there are still companies want to try to do illegal things. Another kind of industry, for example, with drilling of geothermal wells, that's a thing that's more or less a problem. You can imagine heat pumps are increasingly popularity of heat pumps is do all the climate change thing. Everybody wants to have a heat pump. So a lot of new companies are starting and drilling geothermal wells. But yeah, there's also a lot of legislation about that, and you see a lot of illegal activities and also a highly range of penalties given.
Is it done because of lack of knowledge about the law, or is it are they trying to cut the costs, or why does it occur, do you think?
I think that's a culture thing. I always say to my German friends, I come a lot of I have a lot of German friends, for example, and when you compare our nations, in Germany, everything, you've got norms, everybody listens to legislation, that's very important. I say always, we are mostly based pirate state. So we first think, oh, I don't care with your legislation and thing. I'm first going to try it, and when I've got a penalty, I've got a problem. And
yeah.
So that's mostly a culture thing. You saw the same thing through the whole world with COVID, for example. At first, the pandemic started. It was for our government an enormous problem to get strict rules, because everybody thinks, okay, when I don't get a penalty, I don't listen to your rules, and that's more or less a cultural thing. So you saw that by the groundwater industry for 2015 or 10 years ago. Now through all the penalties, everybody knows, okay, we have to care. And the same is going to be with the geothermal wells. In 10 years, it will be better, I think.
Yeah. We have a question here from Anders Retzner. A very good presentation and video at the end. Are you hiring? Have you seen any practical changes in the industry already with regards to climate change? Would you say that the government or you, the industry, I think, are most driving in preparing for climate change with regards to hydrogeology?
Yeah, we see changes already because our principals are asking for change. For example, 10 years ago, nobody was caring about the ways my pumps are driven, diesel driven, or how much energy I'm using. That was a cost question. Nowadays, when they want to give away a project, there are rules written down. Don't do that with diesel-driven pumps, for example, or only with green energy. Also, we want to completely re-infiltrate the sweet water system again back in the soil to keep the groundwater level in original state. So yeah, in the last years it's going very fast. More and more legislation is coming to the fact of climate change.
So the government is the one that is driving this process by creating new laws and demands.
Yeah, they have to do that, of course, because they also on world scale level, on the European level, they committed to the fact that they have to reduce almost 50% of CO2 by 2030, and I believe more than 80% in 2050. So they have to create new rules and legislation about that.
Yes. We have one more question here from Kristina Frycklund. In the higher areas in the east, is there any infiltration there to compensate for lower groundwater levels? If so, where is the infiltration water coming from? Do you have, yeah, I think, yeah, do you have cross-border cooperations regarding water for this?
Back to the first question here with re-infiltrating water in the higher parts of the Netherlands. On smaller scales, it's already done here. When you see the map here, in a higher part, the browner color is approximately 80 until 100 meters above sea level. That are hills. Yeah, but they're talking about it to do that more and more. For example, here's this part of the Netherlands a river, a nearby river from the River Rhine. The IJssel is running here, and its water is going to the IJssel, to the complete IJsselmeer, the former Zuiderzee. It's sweet water, and then to the sea. And talking about systems to build to pump the water to the higher levels in the country and to re-infiltrate that. That is a discussion. We are doing that for more than a few decades, but through the fact that the last 3 summers were very dry, yeah, people are talking about that. Water boards, for example, yeah, testing systems. We are also doing that for water boards as a project to test that kind of systems, to pump water on a higher scale on the land and what will happen. And they're testing it. Yeah.
And for example, like along the German border or the border to Belgium, is there a cooperation, a cross-border cooperation concerning water? If the water that reaches the Netherlands comes from infiltrating in Germany, for example?
I know more about the German-Dutch situation than the Belgium-Dutch situation. Yes, there is cooperation. They've got a different kind of organization. In German, it's called the Untere Wasserbehörde. That's, for example, groundwater is there are hundreds of smaller organizations, smaller water boards concerning groundwater. And for example, near the border, a lot of villages are laying there. And when you want to pump up water one side of the border, yeah, you have to inform also on the other side of the border the German water board. You don't have to do that yourself, but the Dutch water board near the border stays in contact with the colleagues on the other side of the border. Yeah. That's not only on water, but also yeah, due to the fact of the complete EU. There are also economically activities. You see, for example, places, industry areas built on the border. So there's between that kind of borders also a lot of cooperation.
Yeah, interesting. I hope we answered the questions. I haven't gotten any more questions right now. Niklas, maybe you have some comment. Feel free.
Thank you, Guido, for excellent talk. Very interesting to get to know the situation in Netherlands. I think in a couple of 100 years we will be up to your level in terms of standardized handling of groundwater questions and so on. One thing which is very interesting though is that in Sweden we don't have any dewatering contractors. Almost, I would say. I mean, we have consultants, that's Sweco, and we have the contractors for construction buildings and so on. But I mean, to realize that the art of dewatering is a special technical area, it's we don't really have that. That's very interesting, and I think it will need to change. But for the moment, I think we're keen on international experience, I would say, and but it's also about manpower and labor. I mean, it's a 24/7 operation, so it's very challenging, I must say. So yeah, we have a lot to learn.
Yeah, Yeah, it's also an interesting fact to combine that kind of knowledge. I see this on European level a lack on combining that kind of knowledge. I think it's interesting to cooperate more with each other as countries. But because on the other hand, there are situations in Sweden we don't know. For example, you've got a total different geological situation there in Sweden. We are living in a delta with sands, clay, and peat. That's the only thing we have there. And so stones or bedrock we don't know at all. You know that only in the border part, so in the southern part of the Netherlands, you see that, for example. We're very anxious when we want to drill there or well. We call to the Belgian colleagues or the German colleagues. So that on a European level to combine knowledge, that's very interesting.
Yeah, I think it's very what do you say? Telling that you started out as plumbers. It says something about the history of dewatering. I mean, I think we are approaching the issue from academic more in Sweden. So, but those two, I mean, groundwater turns very practical doing dewatering. So yeah, I think it's a good perspective in some way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, thanks a lot. No more questions right now. So we thank you, Guido, and I also take the opportunity to remember how to say about coming webinars. Så på svenska, nästa blir 9 april om geoenergi i Sverige. David Klemets och Sara Eriksson kommer att prata om det. Därefter i början av maj så blir det grundvattenmodellen som man har arbetat med för hamnbanan i Göteborg. Patrik Lissel kommer att prata om det. I början av juni så blir det berginjektering och hydrogeologi i Västlänken med Magnus Ödlund och Christian Butron. Och i september så blir, alltså höstterminens första webbinarium, blir groundwater control for construction med Martin Preen. Så se till att ha koll på oss i SGF Grundvatten så att ni inte missar något spännande. Och kom gärna med förslag och bli gärna medlemmar. Yes. Have a nice weekend and thanks again
thank you
to everyone. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Guido.
Bye bye.